As Victor stepped out of Souvenir, several soft rays of sunlight fell upon his eyes. It was an ordinary early morning. A smattering of backpackers walked the clean pavements, and the street-facing shops had opened their doors. It was then that he noticed the art gallery across the street had hung a new painting. The artist's rendition of a bustling London street corner was depicted with meticulous brushwork. He stood transfixed for several seconds, allowing his gaze to linger over it. Just then, a black Maybach pulled up beside him. The driver got out and swiftly opened the car door, whispering something to him. Victor's face betrayed no emotion, maintaining that same placid expression. But for a brief moment, an inscrutable look flashed across his eyes. Sure enough, Special Task Force had conducted another spot check after the cargo was unloaded. If he hadn't preemptively taken away the box she was hiding in, the situation would have gotten thorny, to say the least. Thankfully, she was safe, because he now had important things to do. Victor got in the car and glanced at the sun-drenched facade of Souvenir through the window, before turning his attention to his phone, which had amassed a pile of unread texts. Compared to Victor's typically calm and composed demeanor, the young woman at the steering wheel seemed beset with worry. This wasn't the first time STF had searched the ship, and it was certainly possible they were aware of the connection between the CEO and No Man's Island. They'd come after LFG from all sides, and this time the commander himself had come. Perhaps they could fool them once or twice, but could they do it 10 times or 100? It was only under the protection of No Man's Island that she and other evolvers had been able to return to a stable life. And not for 1 minute did she want to return to that former life of constant worrying and feeling like an outcast. As these thoughts ran through her mind, she began to say something, and then stopped, unconsciously letting out a heavy sigh that hung distinctly in the silence of the car. When her mind refocused, Victor had looked up from his phone.
Sir,
She glanced nervously at Victor in the back seat through the rearview mirror. His expression was as stern as ever, and the concern she was trying to voice was immediately cut short by that somber gaze. But Victor already knew what was on her mind.
Don't worry. Going forward, we'll just have to take more precautions.
The young woman nodded in agreement, then suppressed her wild imaginings and turned her attention to the road in front of them. Another new message popped up on Victor's phone. Goldman's cautiously concerned attitude was crystal clear in the careful phrasing of his text. Victor knew that Leto had already determined that he was the boss of No Man's Island. He just lacked the proof. Therefore, LFG was also in STF's crosshairs, and missing that target left a sour taste in their mouth. But that didn't matter. Aside from STF, there was something he cared about even more. What had happened to her Evol? Victor contemplated for a moment. Then he pulled up a name from his contacts list and sent a text. Soon after, an investigation report was placed before him, taking much less time than he'd anticipated. But this only proved that whatever appeared in the report was no longer a secret. The Evolution Accelerator prototype was manufactured by the former Ultimo Bio Research Center. Due to a lack of core technology capable of harnessing and promoting Evol evolution, it was initially a half-finished product, unable to be put into service. As Victor read over the report, his eyes fixated on the word evolution, and his expression grew grave and conflicted. Technology that could evolve Evol through external means wasn't something that could just be developed overnight. It seemed that STF had been hard at work for some time. Lost in thought, Victor's brow furrowed. Suddenly, a flurry of notifications beeped on his phone. It was a meandering string of texts from the girl, yammering about how she was behind on her proposal, and begging him to take pity on her. She excitedly described the snacks she bought from a little street vendor, ending the sentence with a string of goofy emojis, and explaining that she got on the wrong subway and wouldn't make it in time to meet him for lunch. After reading her messages, his face relaxed, and his tightly pursed lips broke into a faint smile. A hint of assurance crept into his expression, and the clouds of uncertainty quickly faded from his formerly brooding eyes. All the clues lined up, pointing to one single possibility. Although it was a bit astonishing, it was perfectly logical. Victor looked out the window. The trees lining the street were lush and green. The scorching sun was out in full force. The sea's surface glistened like diamonds under the sun's rays, a dazzling display. There was a knock at the door. Victor put the investigation report into a drawer, no longer concerned about the minor details contained within.
Come in.
Goldman was holding quite a few documents, but the first thing Victor noticed about him was the hesitant look on his face, as if he wanted to say something.
How many more walked?
Goldman was uncharacteristically taciturn, as he deftly handled the documents, presenting each contract page by page to Victor. Victor scanned through the contracts, then signed his name on the last page. When all the documents were once again back in Goldman's possession, Victor gave him a glance.
Don't pay any mind to their comings and goings. Just do your job.
But sir, I feel like something strange is going on.
Goldman's halting tone wasn't so much indignant as it was distressed.
LFG gave them work, even getting on the STF's bad side for it. And still, they just walk away.
Victor remained silent. Over the past month, there had been a spate of people leaving the shelter they had sought on No Man's Island. Some left quietly, and others after giving an earnest gift of thanks. At first it was a few, and then dozens, until No Man's Island was perhaps only 2/3 of its former numbers. Intuition told him that something was off, that there must be some deeper conspiracy in play.
People are free to make their own decisions. If they want to go, No Man's Island will, of course, let them.
Victor glanced at his wristwatch.
There's no urgent business at this afternoon's meeting, so I won't be going. See to the arrangements.
As more and more people left, dozens of names had been crossed off the list of evolvers on No Man's Island. With their departures, the atmosphere on the island grew precarious. They stole away mysteriously, never disclosing to others where they were headed, even among their closest friends and companions. But they all left without hesitation, their faces full of hope and yearning for the future. It was all very suspicious. This became a topic of idle conversation amongst everyone on No Man's Island. They conjectured all sorts of possibilities, tried to discern the boss's thoughts on the matter, and scrounged up news about it from various sources. Motivated by both the spirit of fun and a desire to get to the bottom of things, they fervently chased after the truth. Victor also sought answers. He sent someone to tail a couple who had left No Man's Island a few days prior, and the results left him somewhat surprised. They'd gone to Agio Street, a legendary underground block of Loveland City. But they were not alone. All the evolvers who'd left the island had gone to Agio Street. Victor had long heard of the existence of the clandestine location. In this world, there have always been places at the border between light and dark, filling a niche in the gray areas. Agio Street was one such place. The currency there wasn't just money, but also connections, one's background, and all kinds of shady, seedy things. Whatever the normal market couldn't provide, one could likely find it on Agio Street. Given the current chaos, it wasn't at all odd that Agio Street would be involved in evolver business. Just as Victor was pondering what else might be hiding on Agio Street, a breaking news notification popped up on his phone. Today at 3 p.m., an unemployed vagrant was found dead on Agio Street. According to sources, the man's name was Smith, aged 23. An eyewitness claims prior to his death, Mr. Smith was traveling with another male on Agio Street. A netizen discovered that the deceased's name appeared on the list of evolvers published by Special Task Force. However, the autopsy report showed that Mr. Smith did not possess any evil genes. Looking at the screen, Victor discovered that he recognized this person. He had been the first evolver to leave No Man's Island, but now he had become a normal person. This was no accident. Victor thought of STF's evolution accelerator and the girl's missing evil. He boldly speculated that the cause of this evolver's death might just be the key to cracking this whole riddle. After a moment of consideration, Victor decided to make a phone call.
It's me.
The person on the other end laughed politely.
Mr. Victor.
I'm looking for a certain something. Perhaps Agio Street has a supply.
The person on the other end was quick to respond.
No need for perhaps. There is nothing that I can't find on Agio Street.
It's not just an object. I also need you to hook me up with a contact.
A hint of doubt crept into the voice on the phone.
You wish to come in person?
Before that, I need to confirm something.
A dropper extracted several drops of a clear liquid from a test tube. The lab technician conducting the experiment was wearing a mask, but just from his eyes, it was apparent that he was nervous. Victor sat in a chair by the wall, his black suit contrasting starkly with the pure white tile all around him, as if he'd carved out a space in the laboratory, cut off from the rest of the world. His expression remained composed, as though he had already determined the outcome of the experiment, showing not an ounce of curiosity or anxiety. So what was the CEO of LFG doing in a place like this? Were the rumors that LFG had invested in a research facility true? Glancing back furtively, the lab technician felt even more nervous. He shook his head and reminded himself that he just had to do his job and concentrate on observing any changes under the microscope. And the answer yielded from his observation was no change at all. Once again, he extracted some liquid and dropped it into different devices. A half an hour later, the results of the test remained the same. After drawing his final conclusion, he hesitated a moment. Glancing back and forth between the two people with their different expressions, he finally turned to Victor and reported the result of the experiment. The white porcelain space was awash in the cold glow of the equipment. A clink of wine glasses sounded incongruously, and a middle-aged man asked with great interest,
Seeing as the serum is useless, what do you plan to do now?
Victor casually made his request.
I want to meet the developer of this serum.
The man let out a laugh, then smoothly picked up his phone and dialed a number. Placing it on the table, he put the phone on speaker. The call was quickly answered. The other end of the line was noisy, and the person on the phone spoke in broken English. The man topped off Victor's glass with wine as he spoke on the phone. The matter progressed smoothly, and the person on the other end was clearly satisfied with the offer. With each word he spoke, the man looked up at Victor expectantly, ready to be interrupted at any moment by this meticulously cavalier CEO of LFG. But surprisingly, Victor never raised any concerns and remained silent through the negotiations and the completion of the deal. And after agreeing upon a time and place, the call was ended.
Have you made your decision?
The man's many concerns were evident in his expression. Prior to that day, he would never have imagined such a dignified fellow like Victor setting foot in a rogues gallery such as Agio Street, much less make a deal there. Victor looked stoically at the man across from him. A moment later, he stood up and walked straight out the door, his attitude leaving nothing in question. Victor's car stopped at a street corner. Several thuggish youngsters were brandishing knives. Recently, there had been a lot of fancy cars like this one coming and going in the black market. They were all well-heeled evolvers, looking to score a drug, all of them as timid as church mice. One could make a pretty penny off them, just showing them around the market. And by the looks of it, this one had deep pockets. The leader of the youths gave one of his buddies a look, then stepped forward with his hands in his pockets. The car door slowly opened, and a group of bodyguards in suits and leather shoes stepped out. This, however, did not intimidate them. On Agio Street, you had to put your life on the line to strike it rich. He let out a whistle, indicating to his buddy to look out for a signal. Just then, Victor strode out of the car, his slightly open black suit billowing in the evening breeze. He looked around and casually adjusted his silver cufflinks. Several tentative footsteps were taken toward him, but they stopped in their tracks upon meeting his unflappable gaze. Victor didn't pay much mind to this little interlude. He had an important piece of business to discuss. The cool neon lights shone on his emotionless face, more difficult to read than the unfathomable depths of the dark night sky. In stark contrast to the cold, sterile lights of the outside street, inside there was a dazzling, warm brilliance. Everyone was waiting in the spacious private room, including Victor. Although all others in the room stood around nervously, their expressions tense, furtively checking and rechecking their hidden weapons, Victor alone sat comfortably on a sofa, completely at ease with a glass of red wine. The wine was of superior quality, given only to the highest-paying clients, but Victor merely gave it a taste before putting the glass down with disinterest. He cast his gaze downward, eyeing the minute hand on his watch, which read 12:01.
I never negotiate with people who aren't punctual.
He smoothed out a crease in his suit pants, appearing as though he was about to get up and leave. But just then, the door of the private room opened.
I'm late.
The incoming man was an elderly gentleman, with silver hair, a white beard, and a kind face. He appeared to be quite advanced in years, but although he carried a cane, he walked with a firm step. He strode over to Victor and shook his hand, explaining very sincerely and bluntly that at his age, it was easy to oversleep when taking a nap, which was why he was late. Victor didn't engage in these little formalities and pleasantries. In his unhurried yet no-nonsense business manner, he cut right to the chase.
The object I want?
The old man laughed, and all of his subordinates took the smile to mean they were about to have a lot of money coming in. He slowly sat down across from Victor, making himself comfortable on the sofa. There was a look of ease on his face. He'd thought this young man would be a tricky fellow to deal with. Of course, he'd done his homework on Victor, and had heard tell of the way LFG steamrolled its competitors, and even knew a bit about his confrontational relationship with STF. He'd also supposed that Victor would cause trouble for him with this little visit. But now, it seemed his worries were unwarranted. In the face of the tempting notion of devolution, there wasn't a single evolver that can maintain rational thinking and sound judgment. The old man breathed a sigh of relief and leisurely poured himself a glass of wine. Just then, the door opened again, and two different sets of footsteps echoed in the private room. The night was still young, and the curtain had officially been drawn.